Let's say that I thought the deal was only worth $50,000.
Yeah, that's tough.
And then they have 80 something thousand of liens.
Yeah.
And again, that could be a mortgage lien.
Yeah.
It could be anything. That's what's called being underwater.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that the person owes more than the house is even worth.
Right.
So they can't even sell the house to pay off all of the liens.
Right.
And that's a really difficult situation for a seller because they can't even sell, right? It's not, the sale proceeds won't even cover it. Today's guest, Kevin, is serious about his real estate investing goals. He's been reading, watching videos, and he even joined my 14-day beginners bootcamp mentorship program in order to get all of the knowledge he needs. And now he's trying to figure out how to turn that knowledge into action. If you're someone who has been obsessed with real estate investing, then this episode is going to be for you. We look at a property in an area where it's really difficult to find comps. We dive into some of the special features on PropStream, and we even talk about transactional lenders for those of you who may need proof of funds letters or funding so that you can double close your wholesale deals. Today's episode is going to be a deep dive. So before we get started, it would mean the world to me if you would please go ahead and subscribe to the channel or leave a review on your favorite podcast app. It takes just a couple of seconds and it makes a huge difference into the success of the show. And again, I appreciate it. So thank you. Let's get into it. Good. I enjoy getting the chance to chat with folks like you. Why don't we kind of just dive in and tell me why you scheduled the call with me?
Yeah, awesome. It's nice seeing you in real time. It feels weird.
It's weird for me too. I'm usually by myself, so it's good.
Yeah. So I started everything. Well, I started wholesaling I started researching it about like a year ago now, which is crazy to think. I came across your videos. I just had my daughter for the first time, so thank you. I was home and I was like, all right, I need to figure out how to, make some more money. I'm a music producer, as I mentioned, but also I'm a teacher as well. I do that on the side. And so I was like, all right, I need some more money. And I came across your YouTube channel and I was like, all right, I'm interested in seeing what I've heard of wholesaling, but I was like, I really want to see what this is about. Started literally watching all your videos. And I was like, wow, this is super cool. I'm from a neighborhood where I've seen houses like, beat up houses all the time. And so I was like, wait, you mean to tell me I could have been making money this whole time? So yeah, so I just kind of been, just doing research, and then I took the step forward to join the 14-day camp,
the boot camp.
Yeah. So I started that. I finished most of everything, and then my first potential deal, didn't end up going through because I kind of miscalculated some things, and we'll kind of talk about that. But I ended up pulling out because the cash buyers that I came across, the deal didn't really benefit them in the long run. And so, so I'm just here now because I was like, all right, I want to definitely have everything down to a science and be really confident in what I'm doing. And so I know you're deep in the game now. So I was like, I definitely want to schedule a call and pick your brain and make sure I know what I'm doing.
Okay, dope.
Yeah.
So why don't you dive in? Tell me a little bit more about that deal that things kind of went wrong with.
Yeah. So it was an on-market deal.
You said on?
Yeah, on market.
Okay.
Yeah. You inspired me with that because I was like, the whole cold calling thing, I'm not a fan. I think in one of your videos you mentioned it's for sale. So it's
right.
But the only thing with that, I've been getting a lot of houses on market that I'm like, oh, I could definitely do it. But it's always weird because there's a listing agent and they're always calling me to make sure I'm following through. And I don't know how that's supposed to work out because obviously they get a cut. But yeah, that whole buyer's agent thing is always kind of weird to me. So yeah, with this particular deal, the guy ended up pulling out, or he ended up taking the deal down off of Redfin.
What was the general?
Yeah.
What did you think was going to happen and kind of where did it go off track?
Basically, the house was a multifamily. It was he was trying to buy it for $209. Not buy it. He was trying to sell it for $209. I was trying to buy it for $200, and I thought it was a great deal. But then the rehab, it needed a full rehab, and I miscalculated. I thought it was going to be a light rehab only because the listing agent was like, oh, it's a light rehab.
Mm,
He basically kind of gave me inaccurate numbers, and
hmm.
kind of just made me feel like, oh, this was a great deal, especially if you fully rehab. I think the ARV would have been like high fours. I did the calculations again, just going by the pictures. I'm like, oh, it doesn't look that bad. And I asked, my wife's father, who is a contractor. He does that type of thing, and he was like, no, this is a big job, full rehab. And so
Mm.
I think I had the rehab at 440,000, and the estimate he gave me was like 115. And so
Right.
that threw
So
my
more than
number.
double.
Yeah. And so that threw my numbers way off. Obviously when we talk about cash buyers, they're like, no, this is not. And I think the cash buyer also mentioned the same thing. Like the rehab is just way too high. And so I tried to talk the seller down to at least like 150. And he
Hmm.
just wasn't, he wasn't interested. And so he ended up taking the house down because he said he was getting a lot of lower numbers than what he wanted. So
Kevin and I didn't have the chance to get into it in this episode, but while finding comps is only one piece of the puzzle, it's also super important to make sure that your rehab budgets are correct. And so this show doesn't have a sponsor, so we allow it to be sponsored by my Run the Numbers monthly training program, which is $9 a month. You could check it out right now with a 3-day free trial. Not only is it how you can get on this show to talk with me one-on-one, but it's also how you get access to my custom-built rehab calculators. So for those of you who are like me, who are not contractors or construction workers and don't know the price per square foot for hardwood versus carpet, or how much it costs to replace a roof on a 2,000 square foot 2-story, those answers are pre-built into those custom calculators, meaning that you go in and as you walk through a property or as you look at pictures or talk to the agent and you mark off what are those common renovations that are needed, and the calculator has pre-built in prices to help you get a more accurate estimate to run your numbers with. Again, you can find those calculators in the link below to my Run the Numbers monthly training program. And it's also how you get the opportunity to come on and do one of these one-on-one calls with me. In terms of that deal, right? Like, it's good experience. You got to a certain point in it and you saw why it didn't work out. And 100% that happens, right? Like,
yeah,
even on my channel, you saw me go through
yeah,
multiple deals that it's like, this
yeah.
fell apart because of this reason, this fell apart because of this reason. It's like, most people don't step up and the very first deal they look at is like a home run, right?
Right, right,
So I think that's really good experience for you. And it's also kind of validating if that seller found that, no one is offering me
right,
this high amount that I want.
right,
Well, it's because everyone sees, that the deal needs to be lower. And that's something that, as we look at on-market properties, I always try to remind people is like, if there's a deal on market and it's been on market for more than a couple hours, a couple of days,
yeah,
the price that it's listed is probably not a home run price,
exactly,
right? Because
exactly.
if everybody in town saw that deal,
Yeah,
saw it was at a home run price, it wouldn't sit there for 10
exactly,
days, 30 days, etc. And
exactly.
so oftentimes, especially with on market, it's about, like you were trying to do, is this property overpriced for some
Right,
reason, and can I negotiate lower and make a deal? If people go in and just look at a deal that's on market and offer a price that it's listed for,
right,
that doesn't make a good deal. Everybody's available for that.
right.
So I think that's one really good learning for you. In terms of looking at off market properties, how are you finding those leads?
I've been driving for dollars, not on purpose. I just have seen houses, and I'm like,
Sure.
oh wait, I know that one is distressed. I know this. I've
Hmm.
seen boarded up houses all over the place. So in particular around my neighborhood, I found like three or four. One of them was on market. And one of the questions I was going to ask, I ended up trying to, talk to the agent, and she told me that there's a whole bunch of liens on it. It's like $83,000 worth of liens on it, and I didn't know what the next steps were as a wholesaler. I've seen videos talk about it, but I haven't really seen anything like specific, especially with this amount of liens in it on it.
Hmm.
So I was going to ask you about that, but to answer your question, yeah, I've seen a ton of houses just driving, and I have intentionally in the last like couple weeks just been driving around, even around my job on my lunch break. I'll drive for dollars just to see if there's anything out there. And
Got you.
I've seen like three others around the school that I work at. So
Got you.
Yeah.
So that one with liens, you said that's an on market? It has an agent with it?
Yes.
Gotcha. And what's your question with the lien situation?
Yeah. So how does that work? Because like she gave me the impression that the liens would have to be paid off, which is true, would have to get paid, but she made it seem like the buyer would have to purchase that or not purchase, pay the liens off. And
Yeah.
from what I've seen, I think the seller has to get whatever money. So I think the deal was for 170. I think he's supposed to pay the difference, right? So the $83,000 would come out of the 170. If I could be wrong, but I'm still
Got
kind
you.
of trying to understand how that works.
When we're thinking about liens are always in different positions,
Okay.
right? So typically most people's first position lien is going to be their mortgage.
Okay.
Now this person, it seems like this property doesn't have a mortgage on it because it was purchased with cash, but that means that there's $83,000 of liens. That could be back property taxes due, back
Yeah.
utilities,
Yeah.
fines, right? It could be a combination of a lot of different things.
Right.
Whenever a property sells, all liens need to be paid off, and they're paid off in the order that they're in. And then the owner gets whatever's left over after they're all paid.
Okay.
And so, what did you say the person was asking for this property? Like 170?
169. Yeah. 170. Yeah.
Okay, so 170, and let's say there's 83 worth of liens. It doesn't mean that like out of pocket, the buyer is going to go to all of those individual lien holders and pay off those liens. What it means is that if the buyer and seller agree, let's say for 170, the title company,
Yeah.
when that sale goes through, will make sure that all of the lien holders are
Right.
paid in the correct order. And once all of those are paid, then the seller will get any proceeds that are left over.
Right.
And so from our perspective, really what matters are two things. Are the liens on the property more or less than our offer price?
Right.
Right? If I'm willing to offer 170, and I don't know if that's a good deal, right? That's just what they're asking.
Yeah.
But if I was willing to offer 170 and they have $80,000 worth of liens, so be it. It'll
Yeah.
get paid off at close and they'll get whatever,
Yeah.
is left over.
Yeah.
But let's say that I thought the deal was only worth 50,000.
Yeah. That's tough.
And then they have 80 something thousand of liens.
Yeah.
And again, that could be a mortgage lien.
Yeah.
It could be anything. That's what's called being underwater.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that the person owes more than the house is even worth.
Right.
So they can't even sell the house to pay off all of the liens.
Right.
And that's a really difficult situation for a seller because they can't even sell,
Yeah.
right? It's
Right.
not,
Right.
the sale proceeds won't even cover it.
Right.
And so oftentimes a more advanced investor is going to look at underwater houses. And there's sometimes negotiation that has to happen with the bank or the other lien holders to help figure that out.
Yeah.
And so that's not even a situation that I've tackled yet
Yeah.
is buying a house that's underwater.
Yeah.
But if the offer is more than the balance is owed, then it's
Yeah.
just as if those liens were a mortgage balance. It really, from our perspective, doesn't make a huge difference.
Okay. Okay. Now, what would you say? Because like I spoke to the agent a couple times. First time I was trying to figure that. The first time I didn't know about the liens. I was doing all the numbers, had the cash buyers ready. Like I went in and I knew what I was going to do. But when she hit me with the liens, I was like, okay, I got to recalculate and refigure this out. I approached her the second time, but she gave me a different price than what it's listed on market. She gave me it's 169 on Redfin, but she said it was 189. I was like, but
Interesting.
yeah, I was like, this feels weird because you're 20. And I told her, I was like, you're 20,000. She was like, well, this is the price. And so I was like, oh, so yeah, I mean, I didn't end up following up after that because I was like, this situation feels weird. So yeah, what would you recommend in a situation like that?
Yeah. Well, for one, I pay very, very little attention to the asking price
Okay.
because when we run our numbers, the results of that will tell me what I can offer.
Gotcha.
So a lot of people will start with, okay, they're asking 189. They're asking 169. Let me offer 20,000 lower than that, and then let's negotiate. But let's think through why that doesn't work. If we're starting with their asking price, right? They're asking 189.
Yeah.
There's no way to know if that's a good deal.
Right.
They could be asking 189 for a shack on the side of the highway.
Right.
Horrible deal.
Right.
They could be asking 189 for a 10-bedroom mansion.
Right.
Great deal. Right? Like, we need much more information before that means anything.
Right.
And so that's why I ignore it.
Yeah.
The things that I'm looking for are first physical distress. Right? So like you're saying, if I'm driving around and I see a house that's run down, or I'm looking on Redfin and I see a house that's run down.
Yeah.
That's something that's going to pique my interest.
Gotcha.
Then I'm looking at situational distress. Right? So let's say that most houses in my market sell within 60 days. And I see a house that's on the market for 200 days.
That's what this one, this one's like 200 days. Yeah.
So there's some situational distress there where it's like, hey, this person wants to sell, but they're not able to.
Yeah.
What's the problem there?
Yeah, right.
And can I find a way to go in and fix that problem and make the deal happen?
Right.
Right. So I'm looking for that type of thing. And then from there, I want to know two things. I want to know, if this house is distressed, what is it going to be worth after I fix it up?
Right.
Because again, is it a mansion or is it a shack? Because that shack is probably not going to be worth much. Even if I do fix it up, the mansion is going to be worth a ton. Right. So I'll know how much profit there is potentially in this deal for me if I know what's called like the ARV, right? The after repair value.
Yeah.
And then I want to know how much it's going to cost.
Right.
The rehab budget. And that's what threw off your last deal, because it's like, well, if the rehab is 40 grand, that makes this a great deal. Exactly. But if it's 120, it ruins my deal. Right. And so all of those things combined will tell me what I can offer. Right. Right. And so 169, 189, sure, lady. Yeah. I'll go run my numbers and I'll come back and let you know what I can offer. And that's the way that I would approach it. I really don't pay much attention to the asking price.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
And so if you have a problem or a property that you want to look at together, we can kind of go through that process, and I'll show you how I just ignore the offer price and get to my own.
Yeah, I can send you the property that I'm currently and I had another question with comping because these off-market deals that I'm trying to work, they like the comping, like there's no houses to compare them to. Like there's houses that I can compare them to, but they're not freshly renovated. And so that's the problem I'm running into. So I don't know if you had a different method, if there is no comps that are like freshly renovated. I found sold homes, but they're not renovated.
Gotcha. If we're going into this neighborhood and I'm guessing this house is distressed in some way.
Yes.
Okay, so it's physically distressed. We know going in that we're going to put money into this property. It's not going to be a moneymaker from day one.
Right.
We're going to buy it. We're going to renovate it. So we're going to be in the whole some amount. When we go to profit from that house, whether we're flipping it, whether we're burying it, even if we're wholesaling it, someone's got to profit from it to make it a good deal.
Right.
So when we go to profit from that house, this is why we look for comps, because comps tell us how high could that potential gain be, right? So if we go in the hole for the purchase and the renovation and we're looking at the comps to see how much we could potentially benefit from the property.
Right.
If there's no freshly renovated ones, we want to think about why. Why have other investors who are more experienced, have more money, who do this for a full-time living, why have they not been renovating houses in this area?
Okay.
Right? There's typically going to be a reason. And so for me, comps equal confidence. If I have comps that other people have done it successfully, then I have more confidence going into it.
Right.
There may be, I'm sure there are, right? There's people out there who are like, yeah, I'll be the first, not me.
Yeah.
Right? I want to follow in other people's footsteps where they've
Right.
found success. And so that's why in any neighborhood I'm investing in, I'm looking to see, have other investors been successful here in the last 6 months or so?
Yeah. Well,
I want to
in
follow
that
their footsteps.
in that particular area, there are investors, but for some reason, I don't know if it's the particular street or that certain, I don't know, that area, like you said, but the city itself, there's a whole bunch of investors because I know one person in particular, and then I've seen other freshly renovated properties in that area, but not on that specific street or like I don't know what it is, but
Right.
yeah. So yeah, but
So
that's a good
we'll
good
look
way
at
to
it
think about it.
together.
Yeah,
We'll look at it together, and maybe it is that you need to expand a little wider and look a little wider. But
gotcha.
maybe there's something about that particular area. Maybe it's next to the railroad tracks and it's too loud,
Yeah,
or maybe it's in a flood zone.
yeah,
I know that in my particular area, there are flood zones that make the insurance premiums on those properties a lot higher, and so investors don't typically invest there, right?
gotcha.
So there may be pockets where there's more activity and where there's less activity.
Gotcha.
The other thing we want to consider is that when we don't have freshly renovated comps, the comps that we do have are usually going to be of a bit lower price, right? Because they're not new. And so that makes our potential gain less. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just saying that your ARV is not going to be as high if you're comparing to, normal owner occupied properties as if you had comps that were freshly renovated.
Okay.
So that said, let's look at it together.
Yeah.
What's the address on this one?
This one is 186 Rodman Street, Fall River, Massachusetts.
Got it. And is this on market or off market?
This is off market.
Got it. How'd you find this property?
Driving.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, driving for dollars.
And have you reached out to anyone associated with this property, or you're just right now looking?
I was going to send out a letter to because I have PropStream as well, and I was going to send it to the listed owner through the mailing address.
Got you. Okay, cool. So one of the ways that I would approach things like this is a great opportunity to practice running the numbers, right? So I think you should be practicing 30 to 50 properties a week.
Yeah.
Right. And then if that means that you sit down, you think you hit that number? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So then once you've done that and then you're confident with the renovation, the ARV, and how to do that process, then you can think about doing your outreach for real.
Gotcha.
And I would just say, remember that it's a numbers game, right?
Gotcha.
So when you're sending out mail, it's great. I'm not discouraging you from sending this person a letter, but just remember that most people are sending out 2,000, 5,000 letters at a time, just because you never know who's actually going to respond.
Gotcha.
Cool. So we have this property, and what I typically do when it's time to evaluate a deal is I want to go in a very specific order. I think of it like PEMDAS, like please excuse my dear Aunt Sally from school, where you look at the parentheses first, then the exponents, right?
Right.
And I have the same order for when I'm evaluating a property. So the first thing I want to do is I want to establish what are the neighborhood boundaries of this property, right? Because I don't want to start looking at houses that are too far away that don't even compare.
Right.
So the first thing I'm looking at is on this little map right here. When you hit that, it pops up nearby homes for sale. And we can see that our property is right here in the middle of Rodman Street. So I hit nearby homes for sale, and then it takes me to this window here. And again, my property is right here on Rodman Street. But I want to zoom out and I want to say, okay, what are the neighborhood boundaries surrounding my property? And immediately, one question I have is is Rodman Street a major road in the sense that on this side of Rodman Street is a different neighborhood than this side? Or is it just a normal neighborhood road where this is all one big neighborhood?
Yeah.
Do you have an idea?
It's different neighborhoods for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you know that, just from like your personal experience?
Yeah, from what I've seen. They're different from what I've seen.
Okay, good to know. And for someone like myself, right? If I'm wholesaling virtually, or if I'm investing virtually, I don't know that.
Yeah.
It's going to be on me to investigate in a couple ways. I can use the street view, right? So I can use Google Maps Street View to kind of look around.
Yeah.
If this house was on market, I could ask the real estate agent,
Yeah.
right? But that's a really good thing to know.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like our property is just on this side of Rodman. And so if it's a different neighborhood, I'm not going to cross this highway because that's a big boundary.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cross 81. We're not going to cross Rodman, and then we're not going to cross Main.
Yeah.
And so that's how I would establish what is the neighborhood that this property is in.
Gotcha.
Then the next thing I go to is sold.
Yep.
And I want to see the last 6 months of activity.
Yeah.
And immediately, this is probably what you're talking about, right? Like there's only 2 houses that have sold in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And this is pretty interesting because one of them is renovated. At least that's what it says. It says this fully renovated home has hit the market. And if we look at the pictures, I don't know about fully renovated. They might have done some touching up.
Yeah.
But do these look like professionally taken pictures?
No.
Right? Like,
no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This isn't screaming to me, an investor just put $50,000 into this property and they didn't want to spend $200 to get professional photos taken.
Right.
So even though they're saying, oh yeah, this is freshly renovated, really, I don't have a great feel that this neighborhood is one where there's a lot of investor activity going on.
Gotcha.
And so that goes back to our first question. Well, what do we do?
Gotcha.
We got 2 options. We can move on, spend our time in a neighborhood hot pocket, right? A place where there is a lot of investor activity. And I can show you an example of how I might find that. Or what we can try out is we can say, well, let's expand this a little bit. Let's say that Rodman isn't the major road. And let's say that we're willing to go down to Middle Street here. Right? And so we expand our lines just a little bit bigger. Now we've got 7 homes that have sold in the last 6 months. And we can then look through these and say, well, are any of them freshly renovated? And when I look at them and I'm looking at these pictures, right, here's the most expensive one. Typically, the most expensive ones are going to be the nicest.
Right.
Does this look like a freshly renovated home?
No, not at all.
Right. So did you find a distressed property? Yes. And I apologize again. Here's the pictures.
There you go.
Right. So when you were driving for dollars, did you find a distressed property? Yes. Yeah. But is it in a neighborhood where there's proven investor activity?
Gotcha.
It's probably not. So I don't say this to say this is a bad neighborhood, but especially if you're wholesaling, you don't have any proof that buyers are buying in this neighborhood. And so you could go through all of the trouble to reach out to the homeowner, to run the numbers, to negotiate the deal, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get to the end and it's like the same thing that you knew at the beginning. There's no buyers.
Oh, God. All right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't say that to discourage you.
No,
I say that to save you time so that you can put your attention in a better place.
Okay. Because I found three properties in that kind of area.
Let's think about this. If the problem is that you are finding properties that are distressed, but not finding properties that are updated, you only have half of the equation, right?
Gotcha.
Because if you imagine, we could go to another neighborhood that only has properties that are updated.
Yeah.
And there'd be nothing for you to make an offer on because there's nothing that's distressed.
Right.
So again, you'd only have half of the equation. So what we really want to find are the properties or the neighborhoods that have both.
Okay.
And so let me show you how I would kind of research this.
Yeah.
What city would you say that you want to search in most often?
The property that I was close to getting, I think is definitely investor friendly. Springfield, Massachusetts.
Okay. Yep. There's so many Springfields. Missouri, Illinois, Virginia.
Oh.
Okay, Massachusetts. There we go.
But that's a
Let me
good way
share
to
this
think
out
about
with
it. I think what you just said is really important about like, just because it is distressed doesn't mean it's the best deal for
you.
a wholesaler. Because I think, right now, if you're into this, all the videos are like, just find a property that's distressed and, try to get the best deal. And so I think it's important, like you said, it has to be like in a neighborhood that's investor friendly. I think that's
Yeah,
huge.
you got to have both of those pieces. And I
Yeah,
get it, right? It's easy to say, go find
yeah,
distress, go find distress,
exactly,
but
exactly.
that's only like a very small part of it.
Right.
So that said, if we wanted to find a neighborhood that had both, I usually call them like hotspots, right? So
Yeah,
what are those investor friendly areas that have some activity?
yeah,
I've just got Springfield, Massachusetts here in PropStream.
yeah.
And one of the things I like to do is up here where it says filter,
Hmm.
they have these quick list choices, and they have one that's called flippers.
Oh, wow.
And what I like about this is it tells us houses that were bought and then sold for significantly more less than a year later.
Wow.
And so that tells us areas where somebody has been flipping houses, where there's investor activity. So if I was driving for dollars, I'd be driving for dollars somewhere within here, right? And you know your area better than I do, but I would want to find, okay, what is it about these areas that
Yeah,
makes them so investor friendly?
yeah,
And I want to go find a distressed property there because I
yeah.
know there's flippers looking for it,
Gotcha,
right?
gotcha.
And then I'll have more potential comps that will give me more confidence and also give my buyers more confidence.
What if there is no more like distressed properties in it? What if this whole area, everyone has bought like all of the distressed properties? Do you just move on or like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think moving on is actually an underrated skill. I think that a lot of times we find a distressed property.
Hmm.
I got to make this deal work,
Hmm.
right? Or we find a neighborhood that has a lot of nice houses. And it's
Hmm.
like, I got to make a deal in this neighborhood work.
Yeah,
I just don't think that's how it works. If there's
gotcha.
no more distressed properties in that area, now there probably are, right? Because there's a
Yeah,
lot of houses out there,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But if there's no distress and there's no investor interest, if we don't have those two things, I go find somewhere else.
Gotcha. Which kind of brings me to my next question. I know we're running out of time, but transactional funding, I did find a company for that. So would you say like, should I have more than one or like just stick with one?
If you haven't heard of a transactional lender, what they are is someone that lends money for really 24 to 72 hours. And they do it, of course, for a fee. Now, members of my beginners boot camp, which is my 14-day mentorship program, if you're trying to figure out exactly what you need to do to be ready to take action in the next 2 weeks, members of that program get access to my transactional lender. So whenever I need funds for 24 to 48 hours in order to typically double close a deal, that's who I use. They charge 1%. So if I'm getting $150,000, they would charge 1% of that. Another huge benefit to using a transactional lender, though, is that they can also provide proof of funds. So again, you can check out a link to my mentorship program called the 14-Day Beginners Bootcamp and get in touch with my transactional lender there. Well, what are you wanting to use the transactional lender for?
Just in case I need a double close, because for the first deal, I almost double closed. I was thinking of double closing. Would you
Gotcha.
recommend just having one or having more than one?
I mean, I think having a backup is always great, right? Like
Okay.
if you can have a plan B in case something falls through. But typically, if you're approved with a lender, by the time you arrive at the closing table, there should be no surprises, right? Like
Right.
all money should be funded and everything should be set. Um, and the biggest piece with double closing is there a particular reason why you want to double close?
I forgot why I wanted to double close at first. I forgot the reason why, my first deal, but I think, what was it? Was it the EMD I had? I forgot there was a particular reason why I wanted it up
Got
close,
you.
but I think at first I wanted, for the proof of funds. What am I? Yeah, I was trying to think why. So the proof of funds was I remember your email about that. It scared the mess out of me. I was
Hmm.
like, what is that? And so I got the proof of funds from this company, and so this is the company I'm probably going to stick with. But I wanted to know if you would recommend having more than one just in case.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's good to have a backup. And, as a part of the boot camp, you can actually reach out to my transactional lender as
Yeah,
well. And
yeah,
so there's a link in there. You can schedule a call with them and go through the process to get approved by them. And then
yeah.
you'd have two, and that would be
Okay,
more than enough backup.
okay, okay, okay. And then with cash buyers, I know I've done I've done bigger pockets. I've done Facebook groups. I know this is like a tough question probably to ask, but or to answer. Like how what's your recommendation on finding cash buyers? I know that's kind of like it's already stated in the boot camp, but I feel like I've
Yeah, I
been
mean, I'll probably tell you the same thing that you already know, which
yeah,
is Facebook groups, Bigger
yeah,
Pockets forums.
yeah,
And then I'll show you one more. So on PropStream, they have this cash buyers tab here. So I can look and I can see that there's, almost 5,000 properties bought with cash in the area. And then you can add some filters to it. So the filters I like to add are, is it owner occupied? No, because I don't just want like some rich person who bought their house in cash. I want
yeah,
investors,
yeah, yeah.
right? I can also add that the years of ownership is a maximum of, let's call it 20, right? So now I'm going to see like investment properties.
Mhm.
Or if you don't want to do that, you can do the minimum number of properties owned is 10.
Okay.
And so now I'm looking at nearly 2,000 homes that were bought with cash, not by someone living in them, and that person owns 10 or more properties.
Wow.
Right. And so now I've got a list of pretty serious cash buyers in my area if they own more than 10 properties. And I can skip trace this list, call them, make connections with cash buyers that way. That's
Gotcha.
another one. But Facebook groups,
Yeah.
Bigger Pockets forums are also really
Yeah.
good ways to do so.
I didn't even know PropStream had that option. I feel like PropStream has all these
Yeah, super
these.
helpful.
I didn't even.
Super
I usually
helpful.
just type in addresses and just get the details about the properties, but I think I'm not using it to its full potential.
Yeah. And again, I know I'm referring you back to the boot camp a lot, but I want you to use everything that's in there. There's
Yeah,
a PropStream training, which
I
will
did.
show you
Yeah,
some of those other things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
To help you get in there. Um, and when you skip trace and call those cash buyers are oftentimes a lot more professional and nicer.
yeah,
Um, than if you're calling someone asking to buy their house
yeah,
versus calling a cash buyer and saying, "Hey, I'm a wholesaler in the area
yeah,
and, I'd love to know what your criteria is so I can send you deals that might work for you." Now
yeah,
you're offering them something and
yeah.
building a relationship.
Yeah, yeah. I've had conversations with cash buyers, and they're actually pretty cool. They just really want to get deals done, and so the- I think the agents are probably the toughest ones sometimes because I mean
Yeah.
one of the agents specifically told me he doesn't really like working with wholesalers, and so I run into that, which is I think again that's just a tough part about this, and so
Yep.
trying to make friends and trying to find a network, build a network with cash buyers is probably the easier thing to do about this. But yeah, no, that's super helpful. That's super helpful. Um, I'm definitely gonna use PropStream a lot more because I wasn't taking advantage of it.
Yeah, it's a very good tool. And to your point, what you said about agents is like this is the give and take of on versus off market,
Yeah,
right? Whereas
yeah,
on market, those properties are free, easy to find, but we deal with agents. And agents, as is their right, sometimes don't want to work with a wholesaler. So
yeah,
you got to practice that muscle of moving on
yeah.
versus cash buyers really do depend on wholesalers, but you've got to do your own outreach and research and things of that nature. So there's the pros and cons within there.
Now, for the on-market deals, are you usually represented by a buyer's agent when you do on-market deals? Because, like, let's say if I'm interested in one of the properties in Springfield, and I say I'm interested, I'll get like 40 calls from like a buyer's agent or a representative from Redfin. So, do you usually do that, or do you kind of just represent yourself?
Absolutely not.
Oh, I didn't know that was an option.
Absolutely not.
Oh,
So let me show you something here. I'm gonna put you on game.
oh, okay. Appreciate it. Because I'm like, man, because I got people
So
texting me. I'm like, what?
yeah, no, never. So as a wholesaler, as an investor, I don't use buyer's agents,
Okay.
right? So if the seller has a listing agent, and this I learned from Jerry Norton, right? He calls it his double dip strategy,
Hmm.
where you don't have a buyer's agent, you allow that listing agent to come in and and represent both sides.
Yeah.
And so I never go through here,
Oh,
request an agent, ask a question. No, you're going to get bombarded. What I do is I scroll down and I look and I say, oh, this property is listed by David Rofo from Prime Real Estate. And
uh,
I realize his number isn't there, but I just copy and paste and Google it.
yeah.
And I'm sure, right? He's got an office and a website, and there we go. And there's his website, and there's his contact information. And now I can reach out
Uh,
directly to the listing agent,
that's
and I could
crazy.
say, hey, I'm interested in your property at ABC Main Street. I'm not an agent, I'm an investor. And we get into the conversation that way. Agent representation is one of the things that is least understood by new investors, especially new wholesalers. I first started learning about this from Jerry Norton over on his channel. And what he explains is his strategy called the double dip. And how it works is that when a person goes to sell a house, they typically agree to pay 6% in agent commissions. And that means that their listing agent, or what's sometimes also called a seller's agent, would get 3%. And then whoever comes to buy the house, their agent, the buyer's agent, would also get 3%. That entire 6%, though, is still paid by the seller. And so, as an investor, if you come to the table without a buyer's agent, that means that there's 6% of commission available, but only 3% is committed to the listing agent. And so, Jerry Norton calls it the double dip, because if you allow that listing agent to also represent you, now they can double dip and take both sides of the commission. And there's different states and different brokerages have different rules, but typically they're allowed to do that. And it's not that they would be advocating for you and advocating for the seller. There's really no conflict of interest there, in the sense that they would be representing you for the purpose of letting you into the property, submitting paperwork to the title company, and things of that nature on your behalf. So this is important to understand so that you don't reach out to a buyer's agent and basically give away the opportunity to give that extra 3% to the listing agent.
You know, are you transparent with the? Because I've seen mixed reviews. Are you transparent with the real estate agent? Like, hey, I'm a wholesaler, or like, what does that look
I
like?
am.
Okay,
And it loses me deals,
okay,
right?
okay.
Because sometimes there are agents who don't want to work with a wholesaler, which
Yeah,
is their right. But remember at the beginning, we talked about how, like, if I'm going to go after an on market property,
yeah,
there's got to be a reason that I can get that deal way lower than the listing price,
yeah, yeah.
right? So typically when I'm looking on market, I'm really looking for properties that have been sitting for a while,
Gotcha.
right? And that are like, oh, it's been on market 200 days. And then I come in, say you're the agent, and I'm like, how you doing, Kevin? My
Hmm.
name's Lili. I'm a wholesaler. I see that your property's been on market for quite a while. I would love to help you move it to one of my cash buyers.
Hmm.
Now I'm offering them a solution.
All right.
But if the property just came on the market and there's an open house on Sunday and
Yeah,
30 people are showing up,
Yeah.
What incentive does that agent have to work with me as a wholesaler? They should rightfully so talk to those other people because my offer is probably going to be the lowest. But I want to come in as a wholesaler when there are no other offers and I'm kind of bringing the solution.
Now, would you still go after that property if it's distressed and it's only been on market for let's say 5 days? Would you still
Yeah.
try or like?
Yeah, I do because you never know. And actually
Gotcha.
one of my deals, this happened during COVID, but one of my deals happened because I reached out to the agent. I
Hmm.
let him know, I said, hey, I'm a wholesaler, I'm interested in property. And he said, hey, the owners do not want to work with any wholesalers. I said, cool, that's fine. Remember though, as a listing agent, he doesn't just work with that one owner, right? He's a
Yeah.
listing agent. He has lots of
Yeah.
listings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I said, that's totally fine. If there are any other properties that
Yeah.
you need to move quickly or
Yeah.
that you're having trouble moving, keep my number,
Yeah.
right? He called me back a couple of weeks later and said, hey, I got a family who their house isn't in great shape, but they're moving, but they have COVID right now. And so I can't have a bunch of people coming in and out of the house.
Yeah.
Do you have a buyer who would be willing to buy based off of a video walkthrough?
Right.
And we went from there and we were able to make that deal work.
Right.
Now, I reached out to that agent about a completely different property weeks prior,
Okay.
but it's in my best interest to make connections with agents who list distressed properties because they're
Yeah.
probably going to have more,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So even if it's not that house that works out, I still want to get to know that agent.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did. I've done. I do have like agents, like kind of just sending me deals, not deals, but
Mm-hmm.
houses. They'll email me. I'll get some text here and there. But I just didn't know how to approach this the right way. But I think what you
Yeah.
said is important. And I didn't know the listing agent thing was so weird to me. I'm like, so does he so that is a great question. So then like if you say, hey, I am interested in this house, do you tell him that and does he represent you? Or like how do you get him not to represent you?
Yeah. So a great video for you to review is the video on the double dip strategy, right? And if I
Hmm.
just go into it quickly, I think it's titled in the boot camp,
Yeah.
How Agent Representation Works.
Hmm.
Because that's the point of Jerry Norton calling it the double dip, is that the
Yeah.
listing agent is already representing the seller. When you come in
Uh,
unrepresented, they have the opportunity to represent you too.
mhm.
And so it doesn't cost you any extra money because the seller is already paying 6%, 3% to each agent.
Yep.
So what happens is if you don't have a buyer's agent, then the listing agent can take both sides of the commission, right? They can take
Yeah.
the full 6%.
6%. Yeah.
And so in that case, he would be representing you, helping you write the offer, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some nuance there that Jerry talks about that I talk about inside the boot camp.
Hmm.
But it's super important to know so that you can go straight to that listing agent and incentivize them to bring you deals as well.
Okay. 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 No, that answers my question. I think I've heard it, but it's just when I'm actually in the scenario, I'm like, wait, what? I just
Sure.
draw blanks. But that's
Yeah, it's just
incredibly helpful.
experience.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that because it's 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 a lot of information. And I think
It is.
yeah, that's why I'm always kind of like amazed at how you know all this stuff because I'm like, man, like, and I think
It's
when
just
you
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And when I get the agent and people calling me, and it's just like, wait, what did I learn? Like, I'm just drawing blanks. And so, like you said, it's just time and experience. But yeah, it's amazing how you know this stuff. So it's just amazing. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. And I think something to remember is that there can be a big difference between your learning phase
Yeah,
and your action phase.
yeah.
And early on, I would tell agents a lot, hey, I'm not ready to make an offer, but
Wow.
I want to gather the information on the property, right?
Yeah,
So don't press me to submit an offer yet. I'm not ready. I need
yeah,
to see it.
yeah,
Send me the pictures. I'm going to come walk through it, right? And
yeah,
so I think sometimes we feel like we have to move faster.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but I think it's okay to slow down and take a step back and say, I need to get all my ducks in the road to make sure I can do this right.
Yeah, that's what happened on my first deal. Like I was literally in the phase, that 14-day phase, inspection phase, I guess, because I wanted to keep my EMD. I didn't put the EMD yet, but the agent was like every day was like, "Hey, did you get it? Are you good? Like, are you going to put the offer?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, like, slow down." And then I think I'm glad I said slow down because that's how I, figured out the whole renovation situation. Yeah, so I think that's important too to kind of like slow everything down because this thing can move fast and you'll be in a whole situation that you don't want to be in. So
yeah, there's real money, real homes, real people involved. So it's
yeah,
on us to do it the right way.
right.
Kevin's on the right track. Maybe like you, he's moving from obsessed to really taking action. And so if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you really enjoyed it, I would also appreciate you subscribing to the channel or leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. And until next time, there's another episode for you to watch, link right here and in the description.